Hey people! After a very extensive episode about electronic drums, this will be a rather quick one. We all know the old rule to practice very slowly in the beginning. This is very important and I myself tell to my students all the time. Because by doing this we can make sure that functional movements are being learned properly and we don't accustom to something wrong. Also, slow and precise usually sounds better than fast but sloppy. But there are some situations in which it is in fact better to practice a little bit faster. Why and how? That's what I want to explain today. It is a scientific finding that what we experience as present has in fact a temporal extent of about 3 seconds. Events that occur within this period of time will be perceived as connected or related. If we practice a lick, a groove or something else, so slowly that one repetition or one musical phrase takes more than 3 seconds, we won't perceive it as one single entity. We would separate ourselves from the level of meaning and practice solely on the level of movement. That would be like speaking a very difficult sentence so slowly that in the middle we would have forgotten how it started. In this case, we wouldn't be in the flow and understand the meaning. We would just memorize the words, but not the statement. It would be better to look up the difficult words and to disentangle the subclauses and understand the different parts of the sentence. If we then reassemble it and speak it fluently, then we can get the whole meaning. On the drums and on other instruments too, of course, we have two alternatives to practicing very slowly. We could either practice it piece by piece, meaning play just the first quarter note of the bar and leave space for the rest of the bar. And when we can do it, we add the next quarter note and so on. Or we can practice the different voices individually. On the drums, meaning just the snare drum until we can play it fluently. Then just the bass drum until we can do it. And so on. And at the end, we put it all back together. I prefer this method because it has several advantages. One is that we analyze the lick or groove and start to recognize patterns within or connections between the different voices. So we always stay on the level of meaning, the musical level. Also, you will train your independence. If we practice it very slowly, we can play it, but we always focus on which limbs are playing in unison or alternating, and that's dependence. If we practice the single voices individually and fluently, and only according to our inner pulse, we gain the ability to control our limbs independently. And that's very important when it comes to internal dynamics within a groove, for example. To stick with our metaphor with a sentence, we not only memorize it, but we understand it and thus speak it with confidence. And later on we can even convert it or rephrase it in our own words. This is why I prefer this method. We end up with more than just one cool lick. We learn important skills while we are doing it and can really make it our own. Stefan Schütz of the drum department in Germany also suggests in his great book Fundamental Concepts for Drummers to practice hand-foot combinations not too slowly, because that way you won't learn that the movements interlock, meaning that the downward motion of one limb overlaps with the upward motion of another. Of course, you could exaggerate at slower tempos, or you can just practice it a little bit faster. But just one repetition, for example, then 2, then 3. That way, you will learn the right flow of movements from the get-go, and maybe this is even better to learn functional movements. I like to compare this to juggling. How can we learn that? Well, we could, of course, practice with very light tissues at first. But this wouldn't really prepare us for the higher speed which gravity naturally imposes on us. Because again, the movements have to interlock. So what we can do is this. We take 2 balls and throw them and catch them one after another. If we can do this, we add a 3rd ball and a 3rd throw. 1, 2, 3. Catch them. If we can do that, we add a 4th throw. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then a 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So we immediately practice at our target tempo and fluently. And with this method, I've often seen great progress in a very short time. But again, the most sustainable method would be, of course, to learn the single movements correctly at first and try to execute them cleanly and evenly, and then put it all back together. Then you are quickly able to vary the movements because you have gained the ability to control them individually. The great thing about juggling is gravity prevents us from practicing slowly with the balls. So we have to find creative methods for learning or teaching, through which, however, we can learn and experience so many more things we wouldn't learn if we practiced with tissues. I believe that the learning process itself should be stimulating, so at the end the result is more than just the one movement we intended to learn. Like in this case, for example, also a great focus exercise. So you see that we should choose the different methods very carefully. Some seem plausible at first, but are not very sustainable. For instance, in sports it can be beneficial to use a heavier tennis racket, for example, which doesn't make sense right away. But because a heavier object moves slower, it can help you to learn specific movements more precisely. But of course you should always combine the different methods, like on a mixing board. Depending on the situation, the exercise, your learning behavior and your own personal goal. To not practice too slowly but fluently right away, I would also recommend for most kind of rhythmic exercises, because most of them unfold their effect only at a faster tempo, like the classic moving accents exercise, for example. Because what happens then is that you don't just practice mechanically anymore, but your ears start to take charge, and it is much better to practice with open ears than just to memorize movements. They are a most important corrective. They are crucial to play musically, and that's why it's very important to practice a little bit faster sometimes. See you in the next video.